Okay, log 4, so just gonna get right into it. I only got 4 movies this time, should be a pretty quick video. Like I said, busy week. First movie that I watched this week, we got some American classics going on. I watched E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial for the first time. And look, going into E.T. with this perspective is very different than I imagine it was back when the film was released. I mean, back then, the special effects weren't so bad. Really, I wasn't all that impressed. And it's Spielberg, which I haven't seen any of his movies where I thought that was a bad movie. John Williams' score just has this whole magical kind of quality to it. And the movie definitely has that, but E.T.'s kind of like what maybe a movie critic in the early 80's thought was a movie a kid would really like. But there's things like the kid actor in here is just okay. The animatronics and stuff is kind of novel at this point, but it's dated. I liked the child element to it, where this movie feels a lot like a kid's perspective. The logic in it kind of follows that of a child. And I like that. I've heard that Spielberg shot it from kind of like a child's perspective. And I could see that in the movie. There's things where like E.T. makes this machine out of spare parts from toys that he contacts his homeworld with. The bicycle chases, that's a very like kid-oriented idea that one could possibly outrun the cops on one's bicycle. But E.T.'s got cheese, and it is very spotted with cliches, and it's hard for me to accept that this movie is still so revered. And I suspect some people might have some nostalgic feelings about it, which is totally okay. I mean, I'm a college student watching E.T. for the first time. I don't necessarily think I'm the demographic. But overall, I'm just almost indifferent towards this movie. Also watched a sports movie, Hoosiers. Now, this one is a movie, I'd say, if you're going by the numbers with a sports movie, this is how you do it. In that, this movie's incredibly cliche at this point. It's kind of cheap, and they've got a lot of stock characters. This is an earlier sports movie than most of the sports formula movies that I'm aware of. But, you know, it still succumbs to all of these cliches. If you've seen one or two of these movies, I feel like you know how this is going to play out. But I enjoyed it for what it was. And continuing with this American theme of films that I have going, I watched The Right Stuff, which is about the first astronauts, the first U.S. astronauts, that is, into space to orbit the Earth, which was a big deal at the time. But going to this, I'm a little skeptical. However, after watching the film, I am absolutely convinced that this needed to be a movie. And beyond just the story told, it's a powerful film. It's very apparent that at some point the people behind this movie asked, what is the greater message? What can be conveyed with this story? And a very funny movie. Like, they portray NASA almost as if it's like working out of a garage with maybe 6 or 7 people, just kind of, you know, putting erector sets together. And the humor's great. It's pretty unique and has its own style about it. It really works with the characters that are established throughout the film. With Hoosiers, I felt like all of the characters were just stock. Like, okay, this is the short guy. This is the guy who has daddy problems. This is the guy who's a rebel. And they weren't really characters. Here, you feel like every character absolutely gets their moment. They're very fleshed out. John Glenn was very much before my time, but as he's portrayed here, he is the epitome of the integrity-filled good-doing, hard-working American. Like, if I ever have to defend someone in court, I sure hope that it's Ed Harris as John Glenn, because this is just the nicest guy you're ever going to meet, and that was a little odd at first, but it works, where I've always seen Ed Harris as like this stoic, his character from The Truman Show, and I think he's kind of stock cast that way at this point, but he certainly pulls off just this all-American dude. Jeff Goldblum is in this movie, and he is great. Every character certainly has their moment, and the movie really benefits from that. This is aided by the fact that this movie is over 3 hours long, and some people cringe at that, but this is a rare movie in that I feel it's absolutely, completely justified in its runtime. To give all of the characters in this film their moment, it was absolutely appropriate to have this longer runtime. Honestly, I could see myself giving this movie a 10 out of 10 if I'd have seen it when it came out. Great movie, but after all of these movies, I just wanted something that was about as un-American as possible. So I watched a Spanish film called Cell 211, which is not the greatest title for this movie. But that's okay, because the movie is decent. It's essentially about a prison riot. And I will say that the beginning of this movie, even the first half, is forced. I mean, really forced. And while there's still good things going on, it's not until they've set themselves up that it really shines. So in hindsight, the unlikely setup is kind of like a necessary evil to get what I think was a stellar conclusion. But, I mean, it's still there. You can't forget about it. The opening of this movie was pretty hardcore. Just gonna put that out there. Direction's on point. Camera work's pretty on point. For a foreign film, I felt like the acting was pretty dang good, and there's one exceptional character. You're gonna know who it is if you watch the movie. Conclusion is great. It definitely builds, and as the movie's going along, there's a very distinct point where the movie gets very intriguing, and from that point on, great movie, absolutely. But it's hard to ignore the very forced setup. It's not breaking any new ground for me, but decent movie. I'd recommend it. But like I said, only 4 movies this week, so tried to keep it shorter than usual. Thanks for watching again, but I'm afraid for now this is